Works quite well on bacon fat, it seems. In this video, we're going to be checking out a whole bunch of retro mountain bikes. If you watch any of the stuff I make, you'll know that I'm kind of obsessed by them. There are so many bikes here, almost don't know where to start, but we're going to go into the saddleback stand, and they've got a pretty cool setup in here with some crazy old things like this old Cannondale SE 2000. I mean, this by all accounts wasn't a very good bike. Look how high that pivot is. Maybe if you put an idle wheel on it now, it'd be bang on point. But look at the thing, it's absolutely beautiful. Oversized tubing, Manitou 4 ATAC stem on there. Now you've got the Yeti Ultimate at the back here. So these things are unreal with elevated chainstays on them. They basically did this so you could shrink the back end and get the chainstays as short as possible. And you think how little clearance there was with a triple chain set on there. So that's essentially why they did that. Incidentally, that chain set is a bullseye, so that was so ahead of its time, it's ridiculous. It's essentially got an axle as part of one of the cranks. The other crank preloads on there, much like the Shimano system now, except that was from the 90s. So arguably, they got it right the first time around. But just look at some of these bikes, it's crazy. You've got a Super V there, you've got an RTS, you've got another two more Fat Chance, you've got a Fat Chance Team Yeti at the front here. That's two colours. That's like blue on the left-hand side and green on the right with it's got ringlay stuff all over it. Oh man, let's have a closer look. I'm gonna lose my plot here, I think. So this is a Fat Chance Team Yeti. I've got to say, it's one of my favourites from over the years. Always incredible paint jobs, beautifully made steel frames. These, so nice. And on the chainstay down here, it's got a chain guide on it. So that is a DCD, also known as the Dave's chain device. Now that took its name from Dave Hemming, who is Britain's first medalist at a World Championships. Got silver, I'll say 92, but I might be wrong, it might be 90. I think it was 1992 Worlds. And Dave is actually here, we bumped into him. This is just like such a cool event because of the fact that mountain biking now is old enough that it has got a bit of a history. And don't get me wrong, I'm not under any illusion, these old bikes were awful to ride. Okay, that is a fact. New bikes are much better, but it's really cool to appreciate the old stuff. Come on in and have a look at a few more things. Actually, check this out. This is an anti-chainsack plate. So chainsack is something many newer mountain bikers won't even know about because a lot of bikes now have a single on, maybe a double. It's pretty rare to have a triple chain set. Now, as I was saying about that Yeti with the elevated chainstay, the whole reason you had an elevated chainstay was so you could get shorter chainstays on there and not have a big sort of what do you say, a bit of a blockage down the bottom there. So you get a combo of tyre clearance, which is a problem, and then the chain getting bounced and sucked up between the chain rings themselves and the frame, and they'd get wedged in. It's called chain suck. So it could snap your chain, it could bend your chain rings, or it could just wreck your frame a bit. And this is an anodized purple plate to basically stop the chain as you're hooking up in there. But, super cool stuff. Another great Cannondale. So this one's a Super V, single pivot, amazing looking bike. They did the Super V, the Killer V, the Delta V. They had loads of different layout frames. They were pretty wild with their configurations back in the day, trying a lot of new things. One of the coolest things they ever did was the head shock system. So note how the fork at the bottom is just a rigid fork. So that's a pepperoni fork blade on there, and you've got a shock absorber housed inside the head tube. So I think it's just a little bit bigger than 1.5. So it's actually kind of close to a standard that came much later. You'd adjust the damping with the dial on the top there. And of course, because of the fact that, you know, it's essentially like a uni-crown style fork, you've got needle bearings on the inside of here to help this go up and down. Four-sided, I think it had 88 needle bearings on the inside of there, something crazy like that. Almost no stiction at all. Super free moving. Apparently they're really hard to maintain, but because of the fact everything's housed up here, the forks themselves were really stiff, which with early mountain bike suspension forks, they were super bendy and twangy. You'd have your brake blocks rubbing on the front rim as you're riding, all sorts of problems. So they kind of skirted that with their own sort of proprietary system, which was both a brilliant idea and also a terrible idea because of the fact they were really hard to work on. But look at the thing, how cool and neat and tidy does that look? Looks ace. This is a pair of the original Shimano Spd Pedal, so this is where it all started, the proper clipless movement into mountain biking. Before this you had flat pedals with toe clips and straps on them to hold your feet on them. Awful idea. And our road riding friends had like the classic clip-in pedals, but it had those massive cleats on the bottom. Obviously you couldn't walk off-road if you needed to, so bad idea. So Shimano developed a shoe with a recess in it and a smaller cleat design. They're located into retention jaws that were adjustable on a pedal. So I think that's the PD 737, came out in 1990. The DX pedal was actually better, the cheaper one that followed. It wasn't quite as affected by mud, but still an excellent pedal. And just a few other cool things on here. Another DCD, another Dave's chain device. Spin wheels on here. I mean, bowler cans, awful. But they were super cool back then as well. Gotta love this stuff. And behind me, a purple paste. I think that's an RC200. Let's have a look at this. These things are made in the UK. So this really was like a, sort of a childhood dream of a bike. The 100 and the 200 I've seen here, made by Pace Cycles, North Yorkshire Moor-based company. Now they've got these, do you call square tubing? Let's just call it tubing for argument's sake. Now on regular frame tubes you have butted tubing, so they will basically have areas with more wall thickness and less wall thickness to save weight and increase strength where they need to, so you might have triple butted or whatever. They do this on the outside of the tubing by milling away material, so that's essentially butting what these shapes are. But it just looks amazing, doesn't it? It's got a wishbone style system on the back there, British made middleburn cranks, British made Pace forks. It makes me laugh, it says atmosphere balanced. All that means is there's a little hole in the bottom, so when your compression loads and they get a bit of air build up on the inside, it can naturally come out. Reverse arch on there, Xtr Cantilever Brakes. I mean, people now don't realise how good you have it with mountain biking. So these at the time were like the pinnacle of braking power, and they're awful. You go through a wet field on those, you pull your brakes on, nothing happens, so it actually makes you feel like you're going faster. Ridiculous. But how beautiful is it? Absolutely stunning. Modern day mountain bikers have a choice of using clips or flats. That is clipless pedals where you engage into the pedal, or flats, just a regular pedal. But this is what we used to ride in the 90s. You used to put your foot in there, tighten a strap, and you're literally strapping your foot to the pedal. Can you imagine how gnarly that was? If you had a crash, you are going down with the ship. You might wonder why we used to do that. The fact is, regardless whether it was a Cannondale with suspension like this or a hardtail, mountain bikes in this era were so bad at handling off-road, you'd be bouncing around all over the place and your feet would literally be bouncing off the pedals. So you had no choice but to literally lash them on. Insane, isn't it? Can you imagine riding off-road now with toe clips? No thanks. On GMBN Tech, we do loads of videos about setting up modern brakes, which tend to be disc brakes. Now, some people think there's a bit of a dark art, but actually they're really simple. Setting up cantilever brakes back in the day was ridiculous. So the actual brake pad is mounted on a post, so you could adjust the toe in of the pad, so you'd want the front of the pad to touch before the rear, so it pulls it onto the actual the brake surface itself. You could adjust the position on the post where you want the cantilever, so if you think the further out the cantilever is, the more leverage it has, but the more spongy your brakes would feel. So there's an optimum position for getting that. Add into the fact you've got this straddle cable, so you have the two cantilevers connected together with the straddle. The height of that straddle affected things as well, so it's all about basic leverage. So the further apart the cantilevers are, the better your brakes work, but the spongy they are. The lower the straddle was, the more power and modulation you'd get from the brakes, but again, more spongy. So you had to have the optimum setup between how high your straddle was and where your post on the brakes were. And you could never get them identical. As you can see by these ones here, that one's not even pulling in properly. Nightmare, they always were. Terrible things. So this is a set of bar ends, okay? It's not something you see that often in mountain biking these days. Change of position on the bars, kind of cool stuff. But it's actually the brand I want to refer to here. So this is X-Lite. Now X-Lite back in the day used to make a load of products made here in England. And one of their products was a bike cleaner called Muck Off. Now, over time, they sold so much Muck Off that they rebranded the entire company all around Muck Off. So the pink stuff came from a components company called X-Lite that made bars, stems, all sorts of cool machinery stuff. Now, they're basically a specialist company in bike care products. So as you know, they do bike cleaner, they do all the lubricants and stuff, but it all started there. I love that story. Making a good rear suspension design in the 90s was almost comical because no one knew what was good, so everyone had such completely different designs of suspension. As you probably noticed in this video already, there's been loads of different unusual bikes, but one approach taken was, why don't we just put a set of suspension forks on the back of the bike? And that's exactly what Manitou did. I mean, this frame is a Marin frame, but it's essentially a Manitou design, a Manitou fork on the rear. I mean, dead simple. I actually really like that approach because nice low pivot down there. It's kind of like a linkage driven almost style single pivot really. It looks cool, completely pointless, but kind of cool I think. So this is a Saracen Kili Ultra, although no, probably not the coolest retro bike. It's nice for me because one of my first bikes was the Saracen Kili Pro Elite, and it probably was similar year model to this, or maybe 94, something like that. Loving the Pace RC35s on there, the brown Ritchie Z-Max WCS tyres, super cool. But look at this bad boy. So this is a Zin, and I don't know if this is the original or if it's a replica, but it's basically like Joe Burt's bike. Now Joe Burt is the illustrator or the cartoonist who draws Mint Sauce, and you can see this with all like the flowers everywhere. Now there was an issue of Mountain Biking UK magazine way back, and Joe did a massive white skid with a pair of Onza porcupines. And yeah, I mean, I remember him riding a bike like this, if not this exact bike. Very cool to see. There's an early orange here, an orange Clockwork. Is it a Clockwork? It's a very early orange anyway. It's made of prestige tubing. And here's another Pace. This is the 100, the predecessor. Now something very cool on this is the headset system. Now back in the day we used to have a regular steerer tube and it had a thread on the top. The headset would screw down to preload the bearings and the stem would be on a quill that would go inside the steerer tube. Pace were like, this is nonsense, why are you doing all this? There's loads of a metal tube inside a metal tube, it's loads of extra weight. So what they developed is basically what we have today, where the stem clamps on, except it's the opposite way around. So the stem and the steerer tube are one piece, and it's clamped by the fork crown there, and it's preloaded together from the bottom. So it's effectively just the other way up. But so clever that they were doing this in the early 90s. I just think it's cool and it's not shouted about enough. Another set of those bullseye cranks on there. You can see exactly how it works with the pinch bolt there. Something just to check out. And then just here are two very special bikes. So let's have a little look at these as well. So these two belong to the late Jason McCroy. I've actually talked about these bikes many times before on the show. We don't need to spend too much time here, but these were actually bikes raced by Jason when he was still with us. Of course, you've got his Team FSR there, and of course you've got his bike that he famously rode in the Dirt video. Super cool to see, nice bit of nostalgia. If you don't know about that video, have a look on YouTube. In fact, if I can find it, I'm going to put a link to it in the description underneath. Ancient MBUK video as fronted by Pete Tompkins, who started the Crudcatcher. Awesome stuff to see. But look at the bike. So 3-inch rise, Zonic bars on there, Zonic Shorty, you've got a grip shift X-ray, the Avid brake levers on there. Classic DCD. Odyssey triple traps. In fact, a pair of those pedals did that to my shin when I was a young kid riding. It's still like lovely to see these bikes and got fond memories of what Jason did for the sport in the 90s. This was not a planned bike to put in this video. So a passerby has just walked past this bike and we just grabbed him to have a look at it. I've never even seen this before. So this is a 24-inch, effectively a Bmx Cruiser by Yeti, 24-inch Accu-Tracks on there, 24-inch wheels obviously. Apparently there are only 3 of these ever made. This one was Rob Roop's. Rob Roop apparently married Tomac's sister. So it's just, some of the stories behind this are insane. Check out the handlebars on there. It's got the Chris King headset. It's even got some milled Shimano cranks. I've never seen that before. That is just absolutely insane. That, I reckon, is probably the coolest pub bike in the world. I would pay a lot of money for this. Just another little spot on the bike, completely overlooked this. Choga Farmer John's on here. So Farmer John's cousin and Farmer John's nephew tyres were a signature range. They're basically referring to Tomac. Tomac was Farmer John. The tyres are all awful, by the way, but so cool to see them on here. Quite iconic for the design of that sort of chevron pattern on there. Pretty cool stuff. Now this is a very special bike. I mean, seriously special. It's the only one. Now let me take you back to a story of when GT didn't have a suspension bike. This was a very early suspension bike designed by their in-house designers, used as a concentric pivot, and as you can see, it has that classic shape that the Zaskar hardtail has with that triple triangle there. Now the triple triangle, in case you're unaware, it was essentially so they could have a very stiff frame, but instead of transmitting the shock back through to the rider, because the back end was so stiff, they actually had the back end joining onto the top tube there to make the frame feel a bit more resilient. Now this obviously follows that form, but this was never released. So the story is this: it was designed, it was being tested, but it's the only one, and it was used in some of the marketing campaigns And then at the last minute, when people thought this might have been released, they dropped a bomb and released the RTS instead, and this was never seen. So this bike is probably the rarest GT there is. I can't believe it. So the collector is GT Retro Tech Shop, and he had to get the bike basically re-put together with hardware, had to have the shock rebuilt. I mean, it's almost comical because it's just elastomer rubber. But just look at the thing. The only one. That could be the most important GT there is. Mind-blowing. Okay, so this one is a replica of Steve Peace's race bike. I do think the frame might be a little bit smaller, but I don't know the full details. So GT LTS downhill, 5.5-inch travel. As you can tell, it's a downhill model because it's got that curved sort of boomerang style seat tube on there. It's got a Tronian style mounted shock there with the big sort of titanium forged plates on the back. Running loads of X-Lite componentry. I've already explained that X-Lite is the brand behind Muck-Off. You know, Muck-Off became such a popular product that they had to rebrand, restructure, and everything is Muck-Off now, but this is where they started, by making these components. Grip shift X-ray up on the bars there. Judy DH, so 5.5-inch travel, 3-inch travel, or 75mm on the front. Hope big uns, crud catcher. I mean, this is exactly how Petey's bike looks. Like, it's ridiculous. It's so close attention to detail. Original AC chain guide. Look at the size of the chainring on there as well. And on top of the chain guide, it's also got DCD on there because he always used to run DCDs and the crud catchers. Just so cool to see people, you know, making these sort of efforts to sort of replicate what people used to ride. But just ace to see. Wanted to share that. As if I've not seen enough retro stuff already, just popped by to see my friend Jamie from Mountain Mania. As we know, he's got quite a few bikes. Look, you've got a Synthesis there, you've got a Pace, you've got two Foes. You've got the Foes I borrowed for that Shimano video way back, alongside the Trek OCLV there with the original XTR on there. Saracen, you've got the giant ATX1 mountain cycle, San Andreas, some kind there, I don't know which one. Santa Cruz Bullet, Durango, I don't even know what this is. Foes, we've got two more Foes there. But look at these. Bomber RACs. So they're reverse arch, composite fork, inverted design, 80mm travel, hen's teeth right there. These things, you just do not see these things. And of course, Jamie's got a pair, hasn't he? But just insanely cool. Full carbon, one piece upper there. Kind of, I guess, a little bit like a Shiver single crown, but way cooler. I don't know about you, but I am pretty much retroed out. What a selection of cool stuff. And also, what a vehicle. This one belongs to Jamie from Mountain Mania. Some of the stuff I've seen here has just been amazing. Let us know in the comments what your favourite thing from this video was. I'll see you in the next one. See you later.